Shalom, Kahala Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash. Double honors my teachers, the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Peace and mercy to the elect, who are the house of David reborn again in this generation. And Shalom to the 130 Yasharallah, who today are known as the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, and who before losing our true heritage, we were known as, and still are, the true Hebrew Israelites of the Holy Bible. In today's lesson, we're going to talk about the rising of the BRICS nation and the coming against the beast NATO system. But before we get into that, let's read this. This is Obadiah 1:7. All the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. They that ate thy bread have laid a wound under thee. There is none understanding in him. And this is ultimately talking about what the Lord has devised for these Edomites. And when I say these Edomites, I'm talking about the ruling world class, or the ruling world nation known as the Caucasian race, or the Edomites as they're biblically known. Okay? You see, the Edomites are in fact prophesied to be the last ruling nation before the second coming of the Messiah. Okay? And in that prophecy, it also prophesies that the Lord, not only will he turn his past allegiances and partners against him, but that he would also have the house of Edom fight within itself, right? Basically fight against themselves, right? And that's where you see Vladimir Putin here, okay? Because if you don't know who these people are, it's basically China, Russia, Brazil, India, and Nigeria, okay? Now, I'm not going to do too much talking because, again, that scripture, for the most part, it explained everything, right? These people here, every one of these nations, had a hand in helping the westernized American Babylonian system, develop and build themselves up to a point where they were able to bring them to where we are now, to the emergence of Esau's wet dream, the New World Order. But now that that's being pushed, these people here, they've decided they want to take the reins. They want to take the steering wheel, right? I tell people, think of it as you have a bunch of bank robbers, right? And they've now robbed the bank, and now the bank robbers are going to start to kill each other off, so that way they get to keep all the money. And that's basically what's happening right now, right? Because again, this is why, and ultimately this is what I believe, at least, right? And this is the infighting that I believe you're seeing. You have China thinking they're going to be the next rulers, right? That they're partnering up with Russia and all these other countries, and eventually they'll take rulership. But as the angel Uriel told Ezra, between the foot of Esau and the hand of Jacob, look for nothing else, because there's going to be nothing else. There's going to be no other rulership upon the earth after these Caucasians are taken down by the Lord. Okay, because they're going to go right after the destruction of Edom's empire, then the establishment of the Lord's empire is going to be done. But let's watch this video and let's see how Esau's ex-allies are bringing his system down.
The US dollar is officially over, or at least it will be very soon if certain countries have their way. Some of the world's most powerful nations have formed an alliance with the intention of ending the reign of the US dollar and potentially removing the West from the top of the global food chain. To do this, a few world leaders are planning to create a new form of money, a plot that includes Putin and Xi Jinping, as well as leaders of Brazil and India, Narendra Modi and Jair Bolsonaro. This new money will soon be a serious threat to the US dollar and very likely become the most powerful form form of money on the planet. Okay, so this is very big news. News that could forever change the way that we trade globally. And to explain this, I first have to explain who the current holders of the world's most powerful currencies are. You've probably heard of the G7 before. It's a partnership of some of the world's most powerful economies and includes the US, UK, Canada, Japan, and the European Union. It was formerly called the G8, with Russia previously being a member, but went back to being called the G7 in 2014 after Russia's membership was suspended following the annexation of Crimea. The main reason for the G7 existing is to keep the power of the West at the top of the global food chain by strengthening political and economic ties between member nations, but also to help ensure their money remains the most powerful on the planet. Of the 6 most powerful traded currencies in the world, 5 of those are G7 nation currencies, with the mighty US dollar sitting at the top of the pile. For the most part, the G7 wants the US dollar to remain the most powerful currency on the planet, because if the US dollar stays on top, it helps keep other G7 currencies there as well, which also maintains dominance for the West as a whole. But the stranglehold the G7 has over the economic state of our world could be about to change, and it has everything to do with BRICS. No, not these kind of BRICS, but this BRICS, B-R-I-C-S. BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and is basically a competitor to the G7, comprising the world's biggest developing economies. Individually, the nations that make up BRICS aren't much of a threat to the West, but together, it's a much different story. Today, BRICS nations account for more than 40% of the world's population and 31.5% of the planet's total GDP. But by 2030, just 8 years away, the IMF estimates that BRICS countries will collectively account for half of the world's GDP, and that's not taking into account new countries that may also join the alliance. Recently, Argentina has formally applied to join BRICS. Reports suggest that Iran may also soon be doing the same, and Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey are all flirting with this membership as well. And just like it is with Captain Planet,
let our powers combine.
Together, BRICS dominance poses a serious threat to the West's dominance. And it seems that they know this, and their very first target to take out is the US dollar. Each year, BRICS nations hold an annual meeting to discuss the future of their collaborative partnership. At the 14th annual meeting in June this year, BRICS dropped a financial bomb that may seal the fate of the US dollar, and the news was delivered by this guy, Vlad himself. Putin announced that BRICS plans to create a new global reserve currency, a form of money that will become standard in Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, as well as other nations that may become a part of the alliance. The most important part of Putin's announcements are the words reserve currency, because for that to happen, it would have to kick the US dollar out of that top spot. Right now, the US dollar is considered the reserve currency of the world. Simply put, meaning it's used for the vast majority of the world's trade. Today, roughly 40% of all international trade is conducted in the US dollar, and almost all buying and selling of crude oil is made in this currency. This means that basically all nations on Earth must buy and hold US dollars. The more US dollars that need to be bought or used, the more valuable the currency becomes. And the United States is the only nation that can control the printing or destruction of this currency as well, meaning if the US needs to buy more goods from other nations, it can just print more money and effectively export its inflation to the rest of the world. Since the Bretton Woods Agreement of 1944, this is the incredible power the US has over the rest of the world, forcing everyone to eat out of Uncle Sam's palm. But if the US dollar were to lose its reserve currency status, it could devastate the nation, an outcome it seems that BRICS is actively trying to achieve. So how will this new money created by BRICS work exactly? Well, I'll touch on that in just one second, but first I just want to mention that we have a newsletter of 75,000 people that people just love. They love receiving extra financial gems into their inbox, wrapped in beautifully written stories. There is a link in the bio for that. Now, back to the BRICS currency. So once launched, this is probably how it would work. Hypothetically, let's call this new money BRICS bucks. According to Putin's announcement, the new currency would act like a basket containing the value of the 5 BRICS nation currencies, making it semi-decentralized and more stable than the US dollar. And to give the currency even more power, However, it's possible BRICS bucks could also be backed by gold. Since the first BRICS meeting, the 5 BRICS nations have been buying up gold like crazy, increasing their supply by several 1,000% per year. And this doesn't even include the recent discovery of up to 12 trillion worth of new gold in Uganda. In other words, more gold than the combined total of the world's supply today. New deposits that will almost exclusively be mined by China, meaning for the first time in half a century, we could again have a currency backed by gold, which on its own would almost instantly make it the most valuable money on earth. Now, the United States is likely pooping its pants at the idea that BRICS wants to create its own currency, specifically if this currency is backed by gold, because it would mean very bad news for the West's control over global economics. But on the other side of the coin, it would mean very good news for the economies of the BRICS nations. If a BRICS currency was created, it will give these 5 nations a better grip on the economic future. They could control more of global trade and wouldn't need to buy or hold the US dollars. The economies of BRICS nations would also no longer be easily manipulated by the US government, and the US would no longer have any power over their money, and would also give BRICS nations an almost unmatched level of economic stability. For example, if the economy of the United States falls, the US dollar is weakened as a result, but with 5 countries combined, this wouldn't happen to a BRICS currency. For example, if the economy of Brazil would go into decline on its own, the BRICS currency could still rely on the stability of the other 4. This could make a BRICS currency much more stable than the US dollar, meaning it would become much more attractive for other countries to trade with it as well. Long story short, a BRICS currency could easily dominate the US dollar, and this is very big news. However, it's not the very first time that the power of the West's money has been threatened, and the other time actually wasn't so long ago in human memory. On the 19th of March 2011, a NATO-led coalition staged an intervention in Libya. The force was made up of several nations, but primarily was led by France and the US. According to the UN Security Council, the mission was a humanitarian one, designed to prevent another civil war breaking out in Libya and to end alleged crimes against humanity being perpetrated by Libya's leader Muammar Gaddafi. However, there might have been other reasons for the invasion of Libya, and as you might expect, it has everything to do with money and power. Prior to the invasion of Libya, there were rumors Gaddafi had plans to unite Africa, and according to unclassified emails released via the US State Department, he aimed to do this by creating a new African currency, a currency backed by gold called the African dinar. This new currency could have seriously threatened Europe's power in Africa. This is because at the time, and still today, over a dozen nations in Africa used the CFA franc as their currency. Called Francophone countries, these nations are former colonies of the French Empire, and the CFA franc is pegged to the euro. It gives Europe significant economic control over the nations that use it. Also, the countries that use it must also hold significant deposits with the French treasury. If Gaddafi was successful in uniting Africa under the gold dinar, it would have weakened the power of the euro and also diminished Europe's economic control of the region. And according to the leaked emails, this is exactly what French President Nicolas Sarkozy feared. Allegedly, Sarkozy had 5 main aims of invading Libya. These all revolved around keeping a steady flow of oil going to France and maintaining Europe's power in Africa. Sarkozy's decision to overthrow Gaddafi was also heavily influenced by how much gold Libya held. None of these reasons match up to the public story that the invasion happened for humanitarian reasons. In the end, Libya's government was toppled by NATO forces, resulting in the eventual execution of Gaddafi himself. More than anything, I think this just shows how important the power of currency is and what some nations are willing to do in order to keep their place on the global currency hierarchy. And it also illustrates why a currency designed to threaten the power of the G7 nations is such a big deal. So what can we learn from this whole BRICS situation? Well, to me, this is a lesson in stability and diversification. A BRICS currency would likely become one of the most stable currencies on Earth, especially if it's backed by gold. And its power would also come from the fact that it would be diversified over economies of several nations instead of just one. Now, we might individually not have the power of nations, but we can all learn from the steps BRICS is taking, like diversifying our investments or making them more stable. For example, by investing our cash across multiple different currencies or many stable asset classes, and staying away from more risky bets that may put our investments at risk. And for increased stability, you can also do what BRICS does, and what I do as well, by investing a portion of your portfolio into gold, one of the most stable forms of money that has ever existed.
And here's another battle that the West is fighting, a battle of narratives, a battle to win new allies, only that it is failing miserably at this. Forget new allies. Even old friends of the West are ditching it, like Saudi Arabia. First, it refused to ramp up oil production for the European Union, and now it wants to be a part of BRICS, a bloc of 5 major emerging economies, including China and Russia. The president of South Africa says Riyadh is interested in joining this bloc. Why? Our next report telling you.
This is Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa. On Sunday, he visited the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and made a stunning revelation. Ramaphosa said that Riyadh wants to join BRICS, a bloc of 5 major emerging economies: Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. Saudi Arabia wants to be its 6th member. At least that's what Ramaphosa claims. Here's what he said during the visit. The Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman did express Saudi Arabia's desire to be part of BRICS. That's not all. The South African president says Saudi Arabia is not the only country. A couple of others are keen on joining as well. Watch this.
They have a great desire, and they are not the only country that is finding the BRICS family or formation attractive because of what BRICS stands for. And so we did say to them, the BRICS nations are going to be meeting in a summit next year under the chairship of South Africa, in South Africa, and the matter is going to be under consideration. And already a number of countries or nations have been making approaches to each of the BRICS members, and we've given them the same answer, that it will be discussed by the BRICS partners themselves, 5 of them, and thereafter a decision will be made.
So how does one perceive this? Why are so many countries keen on joining BRICS? And what about the Saudis? What's their intention? To answer this, we'll first have to understand the purpose of BRICS. It was established to serve as an alternative to Western blocs, to counter their hegemony in geopolitics and the global economy. So, is Riyadh's bid to join BRICS an attempt to disassociate itself from the West? It surely seems like it, because Saudi Arabia's relations with Washington have hit a new low. Look at some recent developments. OPEC Plus has refused Biden's request to ramp up oil production. It then snubbed Biden's threats with a sharply worded statement. Then, as if to rub salt on injury, an American citizen has been sentenced to 16 years in prison in the kingdom. This was followed by another snub. Saudi Arabia did not extend an invitation to American officials for an investment conference scheduled for later this month. And now Saudi Arabia wants to join BRICS. It all seems to be part of a strategy. Saudi Arabia's push to decouple itself from the United States and ultimately the West.
This is Obadiah 1:3. The pride of thine heart hath deceived thee, thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock, whose habitation is high, that saith in his heart, who shall bring me down to the ground? So as you just seen in those 2 videos, Salaki, the first one's a little bit long. I try to clip it down, get rid of the unneeded stuff, but it was just full of good information to give you, Akim, an understanding of how important or how dangerous the BRIC alliance is to Esau's system. Okay, and what I loved about that first report is how that lady included the repercussions of what happened to Libya and Gaddafi. When he tried to bring out a new currency that was backed by gold, right? And now you understand too why over these last decades that there's been tons of signs all over America saying we buy gold. Where do you think all that gold went to? It went to China, India, Russia, all those countries, man. Because why? Because they've been planning this betrayal against Esau's kingdom for a long time. Okay. Now, as it tells you here, right, the pride of thine heart has deceived thee. Now, who's this talking about? This is talking about the Edomites, right? They never thought that these people, these heathens who they let in on the scheme, right, on the jig, right, to bring forward the New World agenda. Because again, remember, China, they were in on it, right? They, after Nixon went to them and explained, everything that was going to happen, Mao Zedong, or whatever the communist leader of China, agreed to be the manufacturing arm of this New World Order, right? That it would help to take down America, right? And same thing, India, it would be a cheap source of labor. This is why you have a lot of tech support and tech entrepreneurs that come from China, right? Because of how China was brought in to Esau's system to help him, build it up. So all these allies of Esau's kingdom, of Babylon the Great, which is what America is called in the Bible, are now starting to go their own way, right? They're starting to, what does the scripture say? All the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The border of what? The border of their agenda, which is to bring forward the New World Order, and also to get everybody chipped, and to ultimately, bring forward those draconian measures which the Bible prophesies are coming, right? This is why the snake bite went out through all the nations. Everybody was doing it, even Russia, China, India, right? Everybody's getting on board with this CBDC, money system. You see, this is how it's all going down, because these people, these countries, these nations, they were in the confederacy with Edom, okay? These are the same people who are in confederacy, to take down our nation, the nation of Israel, right? And this is ultimately why they're going to have to pay for what they've done, right? So again, Esau's going down, and these traitors to Esau's systems aren't going to raise up after his fall. They're going to go right down with them, right? All these nations are going into slavery when the Lord comes back. And the only people who are going to be venerated and upheld are going to be the Israelites, the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. And then after 1,000 years of bondage of these nations, serving their, penance to us, they'll be permitted to go back into their kingdoms and rule accordingly based off of the Bible, right? And still paying tribute unto us, and still obeying the rule of the Lord, with us watching over them, right? However, the nation of Edom is not so lucky. They will be ultimately wiped out after the 1,000 years. So says the Bible. Now, that being said, as you heard in the second video by the Indian News Report, that Saudi Arabia has basically given the bird to America. They basically have said, screw you guys, we're going to go on to somebody else now. Because if you're unaware of what the importance of Saudi Arabia is, they are basically the foundation which the American dollar is built upon, right? There's something known as the petrodollar, okay? You see, this world runs on gasoline, okay? It runs off of oil. And this is why America is so interested in securing oil, maintaining oil, right? Why is that? Because he who has the oil controls the world, okay? And that's what America is, right? And where do they get their oil from? They get it America produces it. A lot of people don't know that, but they get a lot of oil from Saudi Arabia. And not only that, the rest of the world gets the majority of its oil from Saudi Arabia. Now, why is that a big deal? Well, because back in the 70s, when you had the oil crisis, right, where there was cars here in America lining up down the street, to get gasoline, the CIA had a great idea to go over to Saudi Arabia and to basically secure America's financial and oil needs. And how did they do that? Well, they went to a particular family called the Saud family, okay? The Saud family is the same family name which the country is named after, okay? That area there, Saudi Arabia, was not called Saudi Arabia forever, ever since the beginning. It used to be called the Kingdom of Hajjaz and Najd or something like that, right? And those names go back to tribes, right? Because again, the Arabs, which again, Arab is just Greek for mixed people, they basically are still a tribal nation, right? Their whole system is set up on tribes and the families that they belong to, okay? And the name Saudi, it basically goes back to the top family, the Saud family, okay? Now when you get, and I made a video about this, months back, but when you get into the Saud family and you find out who they are, these were basically the Amalekites, the small hatters, right? The 1948ers who had snuck in with the Arabs, right? Back in the Ottoman Empire and during the rise of the Ottoman Empire and all this stuff. Well, this is the Amalekites who basically converted to Islam, right? But and now, when you look into the Saud family, this is why the Saud family are friends with the nation of Israel, because again, they're all the same people, though they like to pretend that they're Arabs or whatnot, right? But why is that? Because again, they married women of the Ishmaelites, right? Because Ishmael is the biblical term for the Arabs, and Amalek, these top people of the Saud family, they then started to identify themselves as Ishmaelites. But again, they themselves know that they're Amalekites, the small hatters, okay? And this is why they're all part of the system, because again, what they've done, they've agreed to only sell, well, up until recently, which is the big problem for America, but since the 70s, they agreed to only sell their oil in US dollars, okay? And what that meant is that if you wanted to buy oil, you had to have dollars. And if you had to have dollars, you basically had to play inside of Esau's game, inside of the game of Babylon. Well, what happened? On the same month that America abandoned Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia said, we don't want that to happen to us. So they started looking for alternatives to alliances, okay? And they started basically seeking out the next best options, and that was China and Russia. And this is why you had multi meetings going on in Saudi Arabia with China and the Russians, right? And ultimately, there's been a security agreement or defense agreement with, I believe, Russia and China and Saudi Arabia, okay? And this is why you have that new term called OPEC Plus, right? That plus is Russia, okay? And this is why the recent requests that America has made to Saudi Arabia, which before used to always be, done and considered, have now been rejected, right? The request that America made to Saudi Arabia a few months back to have them increase the oil production, they denied that, right? They said no, they're not going to. That they got to watch out for their own economy. And then the most recent request that Joe Biden's administration made to the Saudi Arabians is that they wouldn't make that drastic cut that they're planning, which is cut production by 2 million barrels a day, right? That they wouldn't do that until after the U.S. elections, right? Which is blatant, foreign intervention, okay? But what did the Saud family say? They said, no dice, right? This is it. And why is that? Well, because the OPEC Plus, they came together and they said, screw Esau. They said, screw Babylon the Great, okay? And just like it says here, Saudi Arabia abandons the United States. The beginning of the prophetic shift in the Middle East. And that's exactly what the Bible talks about, man. And that's in 2nd Ezra 15:31. And then shall the dragons have the upper hand, remembering their nature, right? What is the nature of Ishmael, right? He is remember the movie stereotype of the Arabs, how they are always in the deserts, basically killing and marauding people. That's their nature, man. To be to be freaking vicious, man. If they shall turn themselves, conspiring together in great power, right? Doesn't Saudi Arabia right now, with all their control over the oil, do they not have great power, right? And what are they going to do with that great power? To persecute them. There you go, right? Who is Saudi Arabia persecuting? Well, America, right? And they're definitely taking it out on Biden. That's why Biden and their king are right now trading threats, veiled threats. Okay, right now Biden has called for the partners of America to not to lend to Saudi Arabia, and to basically not do an embargo, to trade sanctions, right? And what happened? Well, recently this video came out today of Saudi Arabia's royal family members coming out and saying this.
Anybody that challenges the existence of this country and this kingdom, all of us, we are projects of jihad and martyrdom. That's my message to anybody that thinks that he can threaten us.
There you go. Jihad and martyrdom. Okay? So when the scriptures say, they shall turn themselves, conspiring together in great power, and what does it say? Remembering their nature. What is the natures of Ishmael? Jihad and martyrdom. Okay? These guys here, the Bible says that Ishmael will be a wild man, and his hand shall be against all. Okay? This is what you're seeing here. And so now you understand why America is going to go to Saudi Arabia, even though Saudi Arabia is basically turning down America. Well, guess what's going to happen in the next couple of months, right? All the bin Salamins, like the king of Saudi Arabia, and all the human rights violations that he did and everything, all of a sudden it's going to become an issue. All of a sudden all the wicked shit that Saudi Arabia has been doing, from all the stuff you hear about, how they murdered all the immigrants that go there, on how they have slavery still there. All that's going to start coming out, and and this is all going to be perpetrated and brought to light by Esau's system, right? And there's going to be a reason for America to go into Saudi Arabia, right? Be it an attack on America, who knows? But I'm thinking it's going to be some sort of it's going to be some sort of economic reason where basically America needs to go in, kick out the Saud family, which is why this Saud family member said that, man, that if anybody goes in there and tries to take out their family, that they're going to basically become terrorists, okay? And that's exactly what's going to happen. Because why? What does the scripture say? This is Joel 2:20. But I will remove far off from you the northern army, and I will drive him into the land, barren and desolate, with his face towards the east sea, and his hinder part towards the utmost sea. And his stink shall come up, and his ill savor shall come up, because he hath done great things. Right? And this is ultimately talking about how the Lord is going to take the American military and basically force them to have to go into the Saudi Arabia Peninsula, right? That's what this means, right? With his face towards the east sea and his hinder part towards the utmost sea. That right there is the Saudi Arabia Peninsula, okay? Saudi Arabia. So again, you're more likely going to see some sort of coming up on our news feed explaining why we must go into Saudi Arabia and we must bring democracy to that country and take out the evil Saudi family who have been tyrants for these last decades, and bring finally peace to that nation, right? And when that happens, man, all shit's gonna break out, because that's gonna cause the troops that are in Ukraine right now to be brought down to the Valley of Jehoshaphat. And what does the scripture say? This is Joel 3:2. And I will also gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered amongst the nations and parted my land. Right? And how do they do this? Right? When you read Psalms, it tells you, man, that they all came together to make Israel no more a nation. Right? They all have played a role in basically hiding and burying us Israelites. Okay, that's when it says my heritage Israel. It's not talking about the land. He's talking about us Israelites, the people, right? The Negros, Latinos, and Native Americans, and anybody whose father's lineage goes back to that bloodline. Okay, and because of that, because not only did they scatter us amongst all the nations through the sub-Saharan slave trade, the North Atlantic slave trade, the Native American Indian slave trade, right? All these different, conquests that came against us Israelites, right? Not only because of that, but because also they parted the land of Israel, right? The Lord's land, right? By separating it apart for the Palestinians and apart for the Amalekites who are dwelling there, calling themselves the so-called Jews today. This is why the Lord is going to bring wrath. Now, this is why all this is happening, right? But I just wanted to bring it all together, Akim. I wanted to share those videos. I thought they were very insightful, and it gave great information to explain what's at stake, what's happening, and what we're more likely going to see the actions, start going towards. Man, you're going to start seeing Saudi Arabia being lifted up as the new enemy, right? So with all that, Akim, we're going to give all honor and glory and praises to Yahweh, Ba'Shem, Yahushai, Ba'Shem Ruach Kodash. Double honors my teachers, the apostles and elders, great millstone. Peace and mercy to the elect. Shalom.